So I love hearing your story because there are so many different layers to it, so many different parts to it. Um, I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you, talk about all this, and it hasn't even been 30 days since your husband committed suicide. Um, like, what's been the toughest part about dealing with that in this whole process?
I think it comes in waves. There's moments where you're strong and there's moments where you're broken. There's moments when you're at peace. There's moments when you're angry. But I think the toughest part is the aftermath, cleaning up the mess. And whenever you're cleaning up the mess of somebody else's choices or their life, it uncovers a lot of things that you didn't want to see or you didn't want to face. And the hardest part is facing those things. And so these women that he's been with in the last few months, or even during our marriage, reaching out to me on Facebook has been really challenging. It was really challenging to walk in his house and have to pack his things, because we've been separated. And so all of my things that we bought together were in his home, and seeing that in a different home was really uneasy. It was an uneasy feeling for me. And then unfolding, some of the things in his closet and unfolding some of the, things in his life that were really hard to see. The messages that he was sending prior to his death. And he even took a photo of himself a few moments before he died. And his photo doesn't even look like my husband. Like, the hardest part is you could see how broken he is in that photo, looking at the bullet hole in the living room, and knowing that we had to take these contaminated items to the dump because hazmat was going to charge $14,000 to do all the cleaning and do that, and there's no way we could afford that. Every part of it has its own unique challenges. The kids, I mean, watching them grieve, watching them get angry, watching them be broken, watching them be strong when I'm broken is also gut-wrenching, because there's moments where you have nothing. You are no strength. And when your kids are lifting you up, that's a very humble moment for a mom.
So you were saying, you guys have been separated for the last 5-6 months before he finally took his life. You were thinking like, okay, this is the time that he was just going to go through a phase and everything. Where's this strength coming from for you to want to hang on your marriage? Like you said, hearing a little bit of the story of your life, 2 weeks after your honeymoon, a woman comes into your office and tell you that she's been sleeping with your husband. And here it is, you stayed married for 10 years, multiple women, yet and still you stay. And then even up to this point now, you were still willing to go back, that cycle of staying in a marriage that's toxic like that, where do you draw that strength from? What were you hoping that, it would be the turnaround for?
So I think the truth in life and in relationships is that there's toxicity like in every relationship, and there's healing and brokenness in every relationship. And so I always looked at it like, when you are married, it's not always happy. It's not always easy. It's sacrifice. And I looked at it a lot like sacrificial love. Like, when you serve someone else, you don't expect anything in return. And there's moments in our marriage where I thought, maybe this is my opportunity to show him how strong I am or how much I love him to get through this, because we had an intense, passionate, beautiful love. And I didn't judge his decisions throughout our marriage because I forgave him. And having forgiveness, I know, is for me. The challenge is that he didn't forgive himself. And so the challenges kept coming. And so I had to learn that forgiveness doesn't mean tolerance. And that's why I left. But there's still a hope when you're with someone for that long and that you deeply love them with all your heart, that they'll realize how amazing you are and they'll come back, right? Like there's always that little bit of like hope. And I knew it wasn't going to be soon. I knew it'd probably be in years. But and I knew I needed to take the path for my own healing to grow from this.
So
But there's
speaking of,
still a glimpse of hope there, wanting the love that we once had.
absolutely. So speaking about your healing, what do you think has been the hardest part in, we've been trying to go live and I'm filming this now. And so I'm gonna use this so because I want to share brief parts of your life and we're going to turn this into a full series because I really believe that Serena, you have a strength that can really help so many women out because you're the victim of being on the end of both sides. You were the other woman, and now you're that woman, the woman that other woman wanted what you had, um, and so you talked about your healing. What do you think has been the most difficult part for your healing process over the years that you've experienced?
Well, I think the biggest part is that you can't heal when you hide. And I have a tendency of hiding. And so what I learned is that when you put yourself out there and you stop worrying about judgment, you stop worrying about what people are thinking or saying about you, and you start to really focus in on who needs to hear you, that's when you could come out of the closet and come out of hiding and stand up and really rise. But for a long time, I chose to continue to hide, which then it just compacted the pain because I had no one to communicate about this pain that I was going through with. And so I would drink and I would get depressed and I would pretend that everything was okay during the day, and I would tuck my kids into bed. And as soon as they went to bed, I would go in the closet and I'd cry in the closet. So
So you literally would try to hide physically
physically, I would hide.
closet away from all your problems.
Absolutely. I was safe there. No
Wow.
one was watching me. No one was there. And my poor husband, to be honest, like that was a year of depression that I went through. And so that's a lot to put on a man, to watch his wife completely be broken for a year because of a choice that he made. It didn't mean I didn't forgive him, but it just meant that I was in such pain that I couldn't see past it. And I couldn't see past it because I wasn't sharing it and I wasn't getting it off my chest. I was holding it in. And that created a lot of bitterness and frustration and anger within him, which is one of the reasons that we really went our separate ways in the first place, is because I took so long to rise out of that closet and stop hiding.
It's interesting. And I've had this counseling session. I've talked to people before, and one of the things I've shared, I was even talking to my children's mother this morning, and I said, one of the things that people have to decide to do when they stay is they have to stay, but not with ammunition. And I say that because sometimes we'll say, well, I'm going to come back. I'm going to be in a relationship. But if you choose to come back, you can't come back with I'm going to bring up one day why I left. And that's why I say, you can't come back or you can't stay with ammunition. Um, and it's good that you recognize that. And this is the reason why I love this broadcast that we're doing, because many people don't understand how toxic that could be to a relationship moving forward if you decide to stay. You know, uh, there's no point of staying if you're going to relive or hash out why you should have left. If you're going to leave, then just leave, but
Yeah.
don't stay and be bound. And here it is. You're saying you stayed, and you stayed in the closet.
And I didn't heal for a long time. And when I started to heal, um, he was so hurt by watching me broken that he was angry. So I was blind at that time. I couldn't see what he was feeling, or the emotions that he was going through, because I was finally coming out and rising up. I was finally healing. I was finally getting out of this slump that I was in for a year. And I realized that because I hadn't seen him, really he was deteriorating, because he was watching me broken, and really taking all that in on his own, like blaming himself and shaming himself. And so that by this point, no matter how much I forgave him, no matter how much I never would bring it up unless there was a moment where I felt like it was threatened again, like the safety in our marriage was threatened. It didn't matter, because he had already gotten so lost and broken from watching me broken, that now he was on his journey of healing. And so this one situation that happened in the middle of our marriage lasted 2 years. I mean, like 2 years of pain. And then what really tears you apart is that you're not always going to be on the same level with your spouse. You're just not. And so no matter what you do, you have to sacrifice your own desires and needs to serve each other and support each other when the other one's down. And in this time, because he felt so much blame for my brokenness, he didn't know what to do. And because I was healing when then he was broken, I didn't know how to help. And we didn't seek God in those moments. And so it really did take a toll on our marriage.
And so I'm sitting here talking with you, and I'm getting the last 3 weeks of your life. The last 3 weeks you've been dealing with the grief. I mean, here it is. Your husband takes his life, suicide. Um, you know, you said that there were, signs of suicide throughout your marriage, signs of depression. Even yourself, you battled with depression. And listening to the ideal of this. And so I want to go back to how your marriage got to where it's at, and then I want to step into some of your young childhood, to where a lot of the hurt really started at. But you had got healed to be hurt all over again.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say that is because you haven't wavered in your faith. You haven't lost your faith in God. You're still a believer, whereas these are moments where people find a critical opportunity to walk away and to say, hey, you know what? I'm not serving Christ anymore. I'm not going to church anymore. Look at what I went through. Look at what I dealt with from my childhood. And we're going to get into that in a moment. Look at what I dealt with,
I have had those moments.
Yeah, you're human.
I'm human.
Absolutely.
Sometimes, you blame God. Like, why are you doing this to me? Why me? But there's really a truth in the calm, and in finding light in darkness. And that's where God comes in, is he doesn't cause the pain. God doesn't cause all this pain. People cause pain, because we have freedom of choice. God uses pain and transforms it into something beautiful. And so it's most people believe that God causes pain, and that's not the intention. God is just like a father, just like you as a father would never hurt your child.
Right.
That's how God looks at us. And it took me a long time to realize that.
Absolutely. And that's beautiful. Because to sit back and now dealing with the fact that you first got married, you found out that your husband had committed adultery, prior to getting married, during your marriage. But you've had issues with relationships, even from your first, when you got pregnant, and that's where I bring in the scenario of you being the other woman, because you were dating someone, 20, you were dating someone that was already with someone. And so, how did you deal with that situation? Because that's a whole nother level of pain within itself.
So when I was 20 and I was seeing my son's father, I didn't realize that he had a woman on base when he was in the military, and then I was the woman near his family. And when I did, I stopped seeing him because I want to be the only woman, and I was young and I was feisty. Well, 4 months after I left that relationship, I found out that I was 4 months pregnant.
Wow.
And that was a scary moment. And that's when I had to call him to tell him that I had been pregnant. He thought I wanted him back. And by that point, he was living with the other woman.
Wow.
And so I told him I would do it on my own. And I did. And 18 years later, my son met his father for the first time a few months ago.
Wow.
So,
Yeah. So you said 18 years later, and we were talking about this. It's such a beautiful story that goes along with that. At the time that you got pregnant, or before you got pregnant, you were planning to go to New York, correct?
yeah, I was 20. I just gotten a really big bonus from the company I was working for. It's a $10,000 bonus. I was beside myself. I wanted to travel the world. And I found out I was pregnant. And I had to use that money because I didn't make a lot of money. I had to use that money towards raising my son. And when he turned 18, we went to New York together.
And that's the part I think is beautiful because, typically you often hear people putting their dreams on hold, or um, especially when you have a child young, people are like, oh, and sometimes they put their dream on hold so long that they forget about it. But the fact is that, not only were you able to go and relive or go and live the dream that you had of going to New York, 18 years later, you were able to go to New York with the very person that kind of, was the cause of putting it on hold. So, maybe he was the hold so you guys can go together. But I just think that that's so beautiful and everything. Sit up here listening to you, and believe me, you guys, I'm gonna have her, on, because the significance of her story and what she's dealt with. She's handled this with so much grace. To hear a wife, you guys were married for 10 years, on 11 years, and her husband committed suicide just 3 weeks ago, March 27th, 2020. At the time, they were separated for about 5 months, hoping to get back together, hoping to rekindle, the marriage and everything. And before you got a chance to, he took his life. And, this is to say, how you're going to overcome, to ask how are you going to deal with it, to wonder where do you get your strength from? Because I'm pretty sure that people that's watching this is going to like, okay, where does she get her strength from? How do you, I couldn't imagine, getting the news that my husband, my spouse, took their life. But you're accustomed to overcoming, traumatic experiences in your life. You've overcome some very serious situations in your life. And so I want to talk about, probably one of your earliest, most traumatic experience that you had to deal with, from when you were young. So let's talk about, growing up, your childhood.
Um, at 5 years old, I was taken into the witness protection program, and I went through 9 different foster homes. My sister and I both did. My biological father was the leader of a satanic cult, and he molested my sister and I. Unfortunately, at the time when we were that age, you don't know that that's not normal. You just are really acting in fear a lot of the time. He would put a gun to my mom's head and, in front of us as kids. And when they fight, there'd be dishes throwing, and he's cursing and screaming. And when he molested me, he would tell me that he was going to kill my mom if I didn't do what he said. When he molested my sister, he would tell her that he was going to hurt me if she didn't do what he said. And so it was a very, very scary time when you're that little and you don't really understand what's happening. There were like recording all over the house. Every phone call was recorded. Everywhere we went, a member of the cult was following us at every time. There were drugs in the house. There were other people having sex in the house, in my bed. As a little girl, I witnessed suicide at that young age as well. So there was a lot of trauma going on, a lot happening. And the night before we got out, he had a big cauldron in the kitchen, and he was doing a spell which I didn't understand at that time, but I did learn later. And that spell was because he was going to sacrifice my sister and I to the cult the next day. And when you do a sacrifice to the cult, it's a sexual sacrifice, meaning they can do whatever they want with us until we pass out or die, or whatever it is, that he's sacrificing his children to the cult. And the next morning, before any of that happened, one of the members of the cult that actually wanted to help my mom was able to get us out of the home. And we had to stand in the center island of a busy highway while we waited for my grandparents to come pick us up. And so much going on at this point, not knowing or understanding all of it. The moment that we got to my grandparents' house, their social services ripped me out of my mom's arms, and my sister and I were on our way to witness protection at 5 years old. I was 5, she was 10. So it was a very traumatic experience. But so yes, I started off on a rough road, but that rough road gave me a lot of strength.
Absolutely. So from there, gosh, 5 years old. That's got to be tough for a young 5 year old. For anybody of any age, there's no age to where anyone can experience that. So, one, did you ever see your father again after that, or?
No, I was in one of the foster homes at 6 years old, and they would lock us in the hallway every night, and they'd only actually let us out 3 times a day. Um, I remember feeling so trapped, and one night they forgot to hitch the lock. And so I, at 6 years old, had my little Stater Brothers bag with my naked Barbie doll and my pair of jeans. And I had my blue sweater with my unicorn sequence on there. And I ran away from the foster home. And I got probably about a block down the street, and these headlights facing right at me, and then I'd look like a deer in headlights, was pulling into their driveway. And they brought me into the house, and the only phone number I knew was this phone number. And when they called him, he said, "Thank you. I wasn't supposed to know where she was." And they got scared, and they called the police, and there's police surrounding the entire area because they were worried that he would find us. And he eventually went to prison. And then from there, he got out of prison, lived in Florida for a little bit. I followed him on Megan's Law, but I never saw him again since I was 5 years old.
Do you know if your father's still alive now or not?
He passed away just about 8 years ago.
How long?
About 8 years ago.
About 8 years ago.
Yeah.
How was that experience for you?
So that was interesting because I think a part of me, like, I know that forgiveness is for me. And so there's a part of me that really did forgive my father for what he had done. I thought he must have been in a dark place. He must have been on drugs. There's all the, so something might have happened to him that caused him to do this to me. But I never wanted to meet him. I just wanted to forgive him, to set him free. And so part of me was sad when he died because he died alone. There was no funeral. There was no nothing. And so there was a part of me that mourned his death. There was also a part of me that felt safe now that he was gone. So it was a very unique experience.
So wow, that's incredible. So how did you? So now you're this child. You're in the foster system. Did you ever get adopted, or did you stay in a foster system? What happened?
So we
Because now before you answer that, did they have to disclose what you have gone through with families and everything? Could that have been like a fear? If you wasn't adopted, anything like that, tell
so
them.
my mom, she had to earn her rights back as a parent. So
Okay.
she lost us. She did everything she could to get us back. I mean, she was also, there's a level of responsibility that she has for being in that situation, but then there's also a level of victimization when you're in that situation. You don't know how to get out.
Right.
And my mom is my hero. She's strong, and she's been through a lot. And she worked really hard to prove to the courts that she was going to fight for us. And so when I did finally come back to my mom, Um, I was so independent and I was so fierce that I wasn't even accepting of her love as much as I love her today. And I ran away at 16,
Wow.
and I lived on the streets, and I had 3 jobs, went to high school. I was using drugs at the time to stay awake because I had to take the bus to each job. And then I would sleep on the park bench or in an abandoned house. And then in the morning, I would go in the school gym and take a shower and then get ready for the day as if I was a normal kid.
Wow. So now you're going through this serious traumatic experience in high school. You know, you were molested, right?
Yes.
At a young age. Okay, so you went through peer molestation. Then now you're in high school. You're in the foster system. You want this independence, and you find yourself now homeless. And God, I mean, did the school know? I mean, did anyone know that you were homeless? Or?
And my mom, as much as like it hurt her for me to leave when she finally fought so hard to get me back. I mean, imagine what a mother was going through when she fought for years to get you back. And then when she does, you leave.
Wow.
That's a lot of pain to endure. And so there was a part of me that was so much a fighter and focusing on what I wanted to do and feeling like I had to prove myself. I never wanted to be a statistic. But at the same time, I needed help at that time. And so the school, when they do the canned food drives, they get all the cans and they put them in boxes and they hand them out to the people that need them. And so they called me out of class one day to give me one of those boxes. And that was pretty hard because I wasn't, open about sharing that with everyone on the school campus that I was, living on the streets. But, um, at that time I was just making enough money to rent a room. And I brought that box home, and it was sardines and like horrible lima beans and things you'd never eat. And so I remember that day feeling like so exposed, but also trying to prove that I was never going to be a statistic. And so I fought through my drug addiction. And the moment I graduated from high school, I never picked it up again until I actually relapsed in my marriage. Uh, when I found out about the second woman that he was with after being married for 4 years, I relapsed, and I wanted to just get away from reality. And so I definitely learned the hard way that that's not how you cope. That's not how you deal with things.
So you use the term beautifully broken. Where does that come from? What do you attribute that to? Why do you feel like you're beautifully?
Because the more broken I've been, the more beautiful I become. I
Wow.
like to say, when a lot of people judge by outer appearance, they think like it's all about looks or she must have it easy. And if you could only see how beautiful I am on the inside and that shined through, it's the brokenness makes you beautiful because you find joy in suffering, because at the end of suffering you're going to learn something amazing about yourself. You're going to get through it. You're going to work through it, and there's going to be so much joy and growth. But it's in the moment of suffering that we don't see that. In the moment of suffering, all we see is our snot bubbles and our big, runny mascara and our ugly cry face. We don't see the end. And we just have to breathe through the pain, and it'll bring us the peace.
I like that what you said at the end of the suffering. You're going to find out so much about yourself. And that's the part right there. That's why James says in the Bible, you should count it all joy when you go through various trials and tribulations, because you're absolutely right. The problem is it's the giving up in the process. And you've gone through so many process moments, because we were talking earlier, and you were saying that after your childhood, you went through extensive counseling, you know, um, and therapy. And I said to this point, now that you're in another, need of therapy, I mean, it's like, how many more moments do you feel like you can handle, you know, before you throw in the towel? Or, are you Have you thought about throwing in the towel? You know.
There's moments when I'm broken and on the floor and crying and just mad at the world and mad at God. But even in the moments where you feel like you're throwing in the towel, I don't even allow myself to believe there is a towel. You can't throw anything. You have to keep fighting and you have to stay strong because there's a reason that we go through our obstacles and challenges. There's a story that people need to hear, and there's always a message in our messes that people are going to grow from, and it's going to help them through their darkness.
And so, you look at your story, right? Like some people have one, two traumatic experiences. It's like you've had, traumatic experience. I mean, you could probably go through every decade in your life and grab some type of traumatic experience. I mean, you're 5 years old, when you were 12, your mom got you guys back. 16, you're running away. 20, you're pregnant and you're having a child. And then, so we got married at 29.
Well, my first marriage, I was,
There we go. There we go. There we go. I knew there was a chapter in the book that I had read. Okay, so
my first marriage
father.
was, I was a single mom.
Okay.
And I was young and I jumped into it because I wanted the white picket fence for my son and I wanted that perfect life. And so I was young and we got married just a few months after knowing each other. And it was hard. Being young and married is hard anyways, but then to add a child in that as well um, there's a lot of obstacles. And I got pregnant with my daughter. And when I did, my husband at the time idolized my daughter and really devalued my son.
Now,
And,
prior to that, how was he with your son?
I think throughout the entire time, there was a portion in the beginning where he was trying to earn my love and approval. So he was showing love to my son. But I think once he had my love and approval and then my daughter came, I think there was no reason to keep trying. That's my perception. I'm not sure if that's how he felt, but that's what my perception was. And with my daughter being so idolized on one hand and my son just being devalued, I didn't want either of them to see that that's what love was.
So okay, so you obviously saw him shift to become a different type of father towards your daughter that he didn't show towards your son.
Yeah.
Now, in the process, like you say, like you can look back and you can say, he was trying to win your approval, so he spent time with your son just to be in your life. But were there moments, and I want you to look back to it'll help somebody that's in that situation now. Were there moments that you say to yourself, this isn't how a father would love on his son,
Absolutely.
So were there moments that you overlooked to keep him?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I was so young that I wanted it to work. So what I looking back now, I was like living in a glass house where everyone can see in, but I was pretending that everything was okay.
Okay.
Until I finally made the choice that I needed to leave him. And it was devastating for everyone. But that was my first marriage, and we were together for 5 years. And immediately after, before healing or before going through the motions of really finding my value and self-worth, I jumped into a passionate relationship with my husband of 10 years. And I was just so like in love with him and just so in awe of everything about him. And he's treated my son like his own and my daughter like his own. It was a beautiful bond and connection. But at that time, as I understood it, he was going through a divorce. In reality, he was still married and still with her. And so we spiraled into this relationship, and both of us um, really shouldn't have been together. I was still going through my divorce, healing, and he hadn't even left her yet. And I was the other woman at that point, and that was hard. I never would want to hurt anyone that way. I never wanted to be the other woman, but I was also now madly in love with this man. And so my heart was torn in a million different pieces because I'm trying to raise my two babies, trying not to fall for this man, and then also just realizing that I'm hurting someone else in their family.
And,
And when he left her um, to be with me, it broke her. And that was a hard thing for our marriage for a long time too.
wow. Do you know if it ever bothered him? Did he ever talk about how it bothered him that her was there ever open?
My Kyle, my so the one thing about um, Kyle that I loved is that he was really open and transparent and vulnerable in a lot of, like, especially in the beginning of our relationship. And so we talked about everything. Um, but the challenge with some stories is that our stories are our perception of what happened, but it doesn't always mean that's what really happened. And so what I've learned is that when I saw her at the funeral, she was broken because he chose me. And she hugged me and we cried together. And I just felt like in the pit of my stomach that if she only knew that it wasn't about me, it was about him. And that through our marriage, there were multiple other women. And when I left him, there was a total of 7 women that I found out about after I left. There was only 3 that I knew about in our marriage. So when I left him and we were separated, I found out about the others. And so when I held her in my arms, I said, he didn't choose me. I said, he might have chose me to go through the struggles with him. And she said, you are a strong woman, because there's no way I'd last through all those times. And
Yeah,
I said, I'm a forgiving woman because I know that we're all human. And I was really hoping that he would work through some of the pain and the layers that caused those things. And so,
so I looked at that and I said to myself, like, wow, what a tragic ending to a moment that started off already tough, with the splitting of 2 families, and it's almost like you know you gave yourself an unnecessary 10 years of heartache. I mean, I know there's some great years in your marriage, but it just goes to show that when we want something so bad in the wrong way, that we have to be ready to get all of what's coming from it. Now here it is, you're on the other side of suicide from the many years that you've been trying to piece together this marriage. How do you deal with all that? How do you cope with all that? I mean, how do you?
there's one thing that I always say as well is that you're strong if you stay and you're strong if you go. So there's many women that are in relationships with men who are unfaithful, and those reasons for them being unfaithful has nothing to do with her. It has everything to do with him and what's in his heart. And if he doesn't choose to fix that or to work on that, then there's always going to be issues. Um, there were times in our marriage where he did choose to work on that. And so that brought a lot of hope and excitement and passion. And we were wild together. So, I mean, we got into trouble together and we were good together. So he was my best friend. I mean, every moment was either insane, chaotic, or amazing. There was no in between. And so the beautiful part about that is that I loved him for all of him. The reason I left was because I knew that forgiveness didn't mean tolerance. And so the most I can forgive, I'd already done. I was already at my end. I couldn't forgive anymore in our marriage without breaking down again. And so I had to choose to leave. but it didn't mean that I didn't love him with all my heart. And so my thought and my desire for him was that he was a broken man that needed to find his way, and that he'd find his way back to me someday. And however long that took, because I knew that he was the person that I wanted to spend my life with, because the good side of him was so bright and vibrant that I knew that the things he struggled with were just the darkness that he couldn't get through and the void he was trying to fill. So it was devastating when I found out, after only being separated for 5 months, that he had taken his life. Um, he was with other women off and on and living the bachelor life in those 5 months. And a part of me kind of giggled about it, like, well, he's really having fun, like, and then a part of me was broken, like a part of me was just like so hurt that I wasn't enough for him. At least that's what I told myself.
You know,
And
and there was oh, go ahead, what were we going to say?
no, and I said I learned when I went into his home after he had taken his life, he wrote, "I am enough" on his mirror to himself. And I realized that the whole time in my marriage, when I thought that I wasn't enough for him, it was because he wasn't enough and he couldn't see his value. And so that whole time that I was fighting to prove to him that I was worth it, I realized it was really him within his heart that needed to believe he was worth it.
Wow, wow. And there was a part in there I really want to bring up, because I love the way you said that you guys were trying to work on it, and he was open to working on it and getting better, but you wasn't ready. And
Yeah, after
I
the
wanted,
second time, that was hard. So the first time I found out that he was unfaithful was 2 weeks after we were married. We just got back from our honeymoon. We just blended our families together. He had a little guy when I first came into his life. He was only 6 months old. He's 11 now. So at 2 weeks after you get back from your wedding, I had done a fitness competition. I was in the best shape of my life, on top of the world.
mhm.
And this woman walks into my office and sits in front of me and describes my home and describes my kids and sends me 300 messages that they had sent back and forth to each other in the last year, including pictures and videos. Some videos of him singing to me that he sent to her. And that was hard. That crushed me. But we healed and we got through that. There were moments where he was suicidal at that time, and I talked him off the ledge because I didn't know whether he was trying to project the attention or redirect the attention at something else to take away from what had happened, or I didn't know if he was really struggling with it in those moments. And so I just talked him off the ledge. We worked through it, and we came back stronger. We did a ton of counseling. We were actually volunteers in our church and volunteers for marriage boot camp, where we were counseling other married couples that had been through that. But fast forward 4 years after was the second woman that I found out about. And by this point, we had a business together. We were running a business. And when I found out about her, it was 3 months into their relationship. And it just broke me. I was humiliated. I was embarrassed. I felt like we just got through all that and we were doing so well. We had a business, we had staff, we had kids. My parents were living with us at the time because my dad just had open heart surgery. I was just crushed. And that was when I relapsed. Um, that was also when I decided not to heal. I I chose to hide. And every day I would go to work, and every night I would tuck my kids into bed and I would pretend everything was fine. And then I would go into my walk-in closet and I would cry and I would drink every night for almost a year. And I told no one at that time about what happened. And as I was through my own darkness, I realized that you can't heal when you hide. Because if you don't come out with the things that are on your heart and your mind, it doesn't mean you have to expose someone, but you need to talk to people about what's going on, the depth of your pain. Because when you hide it, it only gives it more power and it takes over your life. And so during that time, I saw him broken because he felt like he broke me. And the guilt and the pain and the blame that he took on himself was just immense. I mean, just the weight on his shoulders. And I just couldn't rise up. So we couldn't even help each other in that moment. And when I finally started to heal, he was just still broken and angry. And at this point, he couldn't see my healing as progress. He saw that a broken woman, and he felt like it was his fault. And no matter how much I forgave him, he really struggled to forgive himself. And fast forward 2 years later, when we're still in the healing process, but I'm thriving and he's starting his own business, and we're trying to work through the depths of the pain and still the layers. We've been in counseling in the last 10 years with the same counselor, but it was too hard when I found he was on his hunting trip just 6 months ago, and he wanted to start his new business. So I opened up his laptop to start transferring over some of the things for his new business, and his iMessage was connected to his iPhone, and photos of a woman came up on his messages that he was sending messages back and forth while he was on his hunting trip, writing her name in the snow, carving their initials in the tree, and letting her know that he was going to leave me when he came back. And so within 2 days, 2 to 3 days, I packed my things. I informed my staff. I told my kids and my parents that we were leaving, and we left. And that was about 5, 6 months ago. So in his new place, it was hard. I know that he was a broken man that just needed to find his way. And I was hoping that way would come back to me. And instead, he chose to take something so precious away from all of us, from his kids and from me, which is his life.
So, so knowing that he was broken, you need to look at yourself in the process of being broken. Where are you at in terms of your pieces now? I mean,
That's a good question. I believe that I'm always in progress. So the grief is like an ocean. It comes in waves, and there's moments of peace, and there's moments of calm, and then there's moments of chaos and fear and pain. I mean, one minute I'm on the floor crying my eyes out and screaming and yelling at him. The next minute I'm laying in bed in silence and listening to, music and just praying that God will give me peace. So grief is not the same for everyone. It doesn't go away either. When you lose someone that you truly love, whether it's a family member or your spouse or someone that's so close to you, you lose a part of your heart. There's a gaping hole in your heart. And people say time heals all wounds. And what I've learned from my pastor is that's not the truth, is that time allows you to remember the pain less, but it doesn't make that pain or that gaping hole go away. It's still there. And so the moments of grief that you have in just a few weeks after you've been through this experience or a few years, it doesn't make the pain any less or more. It's going to be there. You just have to stay focused on the light.
but I want to talk about the message on the mirror and the significance of that, because you said for a long time you always thought you wasn't.
Yeah, I thought if I was enough, he wouldn't have cheated. If I was enough and gave him what he wanted, then he would still be here with me. If I was enough, I wouldn't have caught him with another woman, then he'd still be married to me and he'd still be here. So there's a lot of significance in us feeling like we're not enough. And in reality, come to find out that he felt like he wasn't enough broke my heart, because the whole time I thought it was me. And there's a void in all of us that we try to fill with other people or things or money or careers or whatever. Even with working, sometimes we work so much because we feel valued, and our worth is through our work. But the truth is there's a void in all of us. And when you don't fill that void with your own self-love, that void is always going to be empty. And what I learned about my life and my marriage is that instead of filling his void with forgiveness and love for himself, he chose to fill it with other things and women and cars and money. And at the end of the day, that will never be enough. And that's where that comes from.
Absolutely. And I was thinking of that when you said, as far as, being able to fill your own void, because it seemed like the two of you guys had a void in the same area. And I cannot imagine the difficulty of trying to fill a void in a marriage that's empty in the same place. Both of you guys were void of thinking that you guys were enough. Trying to expect that fulfilling to come from a person who's just as empty in that area. And so, I'm glad that you came to the decision. And it's often difficult to find that decision in tragedies, such as, dealing with the death of a loved one. Sometimes we find it later. And that's that song that when the well runs dry. Now you kind of miss and you replay the moments and everything. I know we got so many parts of your story and everything, but because I am recording this part because for some reason I'm live, but I do want you to end this part off with something that would inspire hope in so many women, because you have overcome a tremendous amount of adversity. I mean, even right now, you're on the cusp of probably one of your most difficult tasks. You finally find a man that's the father to your children. You guys had a child together, correct?
No, we had a blended family, but his son was 6 months when I came into his life. So I'm mommy number two.
Okay, so you have to know what a blended family. And the very thing that was missing in one man turned out to be the beautiful thing for both your children. They were able to see. And so now, gosh, I said this the other day. My father passed away Friday, and I said, this is the worst time for anybody to pass away. It's like now you don't even go nowhere. You got to literally, like, you're stuck in the house. You're sheltered in, and you're like, you have to be. So with your children, the effects on you guys, toppled off of what's going on in society. I mean, that just speaks guidance to your strength. But how are you dealing with all that, and how can you encourage anyone that's, they're probably listening to your story like, dang, it's not as bad as I thought. I can overcome this part. I mean, I'm sitting up over here sending her this, there's a song called "Gracefully Broken." You ever get a chance to listen to it? It's by I can't think of her name. It's just stuck on the tip of my tongue right now, but it's a gospel song by Tasha Cobbs. There you go, Tasha Cobbs, called "Gracefully Broken." You say beautifully broken,
Yeah.
but it's kind of like what the song is saying. So there are people that are listening, women and men. We tend to think that men can't be broken in this area, and as you're saying right now, obviously he took his life in a broken state. And so I don't know all the weights that he had, all that was on his shoulder, the difficulties. Um, I can speak from my perspective as being a man. I was married before, and my first wife, we were childhood friends. We grew up together, church, everything. So when we got married, we were like the church Obamas, if you will. What I mean? We were like looked at it like, oh, my first wife, real beautiful, and we wasn't young when we got married, but we were first, we were mid-30s, I guess, 30, 33, 34, 32, somewhere around about that. but the immaturity, of not knowing how to be a husband, not ready, just a lot of different little things. And both had good careers, good job, lived in Marietta, so that brings on its own perception. Living in Marietta, friends and everything in the community. And so we got a divorce. I started dating my now current wife, which I'm going through a divorce as well, because, as I said earlier, my desire of wanting to be um, appreciated, and thinking that we're working together, we're pastors of a church, we're working on this together, and we're thinking that because I'm spending time with you at church, that we're spending quality time together, that we were doing business together, that we spending quality time together, not just in separate the two. And as recently, me and my first wife, we've been talking a lot. One of the things that that's been a part of our healing for the last 5 years of her and I being separated, that we hid from, I'm not gonna say so much her, because I know she wanted to have this conversation. I'm the one that filed for divorce, but for the 5 years, I had hid from having this conversation with her, talking to her about why I chose to divorce, why I chose to be, and because I came out of hiding. I love the term that you use, because it makes it make so much sense. So many people want to hide from their problems. They want to hide from the conversation. They want to hide from reality and think that, kind of like the ostrich effect. As long as my head is in the ground and the problem, I don't see it, it's not happening. But the reality of it is, I'm in more danger hiding from the problem than I am facing.
Yeah.
And so, go ahead.
The big thing is that I would want to share is that you can't heal when you hide. You can't heal when you're pretending everything's okay. You can't heal when you have this Facebook highlight reel that only shows the perfect side of your family. You can't heal when you're trying to protect somebody else and their character and their integrity. You can't heal when you hide. Because when you hide, you suppress. When you start to communicate about the things that you're facing and the challenges and the hurt and the pain, your healing starts to really come out. And that's why they say that when the darkness can't survive when the light comes, because the light overpowers the darkness. But hiding in the darkness is exactly what we do we're not healing and we're hiding from that. So when we come out into the light, it takes courage and it takes bravery. It takes being vulnerable and transparent, and it takes facing judgment sometimes. But the healing process is messy, but it's worth it.
Absolutely. And I think that that's what's so unique about it. And so I'm going to stop this recording right now, but I really enjoyed part one of your story, which is so, so powerful.